Hello to everyone, welcome to our second part of Order, Disorder, and Reorder. What do we do with our fear? So I hope that I can finish this up. If not, then I have to split it up again. So this is your Pastor Yadi. Welcome. Our age has been called the age of anxiety, and I think it's probably a good description for this time. We no longer know where our foundations are. When we're not sure what is certain, when the world and our worldview keep being redefined every few months, we're going to be anxious. We want to get rid of that anxiety as quickly as we can. And yet, to be a good leader of anything today, to be a good pastor, a good bishop, or I'm sure a good father or mother or a friend, we have to be able to contain, to hold patiently, and a certain degree of anxiety. Probably the higher the level of leader someone is, the more anxiety he or she must be capable of holding. Leaders who cannot hold anxiety will never lead us to any place new. That's probably why the Bible says so often, do not be afraid. If we cannot calmly hold a certain degree of anxiety, we will always be looking for somewhere to expel it. Expelling what we can't embrace gives us an identity, but it's a negative identity. It's not life energy, it's death energy. Formulating what we are against gives us a very quick, clear, and clean sense of ourselves. Thus, most people fall for it. People more easily define themselves by what they are against, by who they hate, by who else is wrong, instead of by what they believe in and whom they love. I hope you see from this common pattern how different the alternative is. We might catch anew the radical and scary nature of faith, because faith only builds on that totally positive place within, however small. It needs an interior yes to begin, just as the yes of Mary began the entire process of salvation. God needs just a mustard seed sized place that is in love, that is open to grace, that is thrilled, that has found something wonderful. We've got to go back and build from that yes place, or faith is not faith. That's why faith is always rare. Religious group identity becomes its most common replacement. Then we don't have to find and live from a positive and loving place. We can just go to church. It's much easier to build our identity on our group, our wounds, our angers, our agenda, our fears. That's the moral, normal way, unless we've been taught the way of Jesus. Almost everybody takes the easier way because it works better in the short run. The activist might look powerful on sometimes even have a passion for social justice. But when we draw close, sometimes we discover this isn't a person in love with God, but a person who is basically angry, oppositional, or invested in their own agenda. Maybe it's a necessary anger, but that's not yet the freedom of the gospel. Political correctness does not approach the immense gift and power of the gospel. Yet educated people often confuse them. Education is not the same as transformation. This is not to dismiss or make light of real issues of injustice. Are we to not act until we are sure that our motivation is 100% pure? Should we dismiss mere humanists? Of course not. God uses all of us with our mixed motives. We have been given not only the conclusion, but also the way to get there. We have been shown how to fight hate without becoming hate ourselves. We have been given a companion and a friend, not only a good idea. We have been given joy in the midst of failure, not only a way of winning or being right. Gospel people are basically indestructible. It is interesting that Jesus identifies forgiveness with breeding. The one thing that we have done constantly since we were born and will do until we die. He says God's forgiveness is like breeding. Forgiveness is not apparently something God does. It is who God is. God can do no other. René Girard wrote that in the 20th century we moved scapegoating to ever higher levels of disguise and sophistication without inner transformation. This is almost inevitable. Education of itself does not ensure we will not scapegoat. Many highly educated people still hate others, including the rich, immigrants, people of color, Jews, and Muslims, to name a few. Is it possible that we're tearing ourselves apart in this country, in our politics, in our churches, because there's no one out there to hate right now? We know that even personally, we focus much better during a time of crisis. We like a clear enemy, and when the enemy is not clear, it is everywhere. Note the rise in home militias in America after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Yet in the supposed peace of today, fear is everywhere. The search for the appropriated enemy is rather non-stop and frantic. It seems the enemy is everywhere because the fear is unnamed and looking for a place to roots. Heads of state, once rather immune, or now the target of choice. The litigious character of American society seems ridiculous to most of the rest of the world. Just pick up tomorrow morning's paper and see how many of the front page articles are about one person or one group accusing someone else of being morally inferior, wrong, or some kind of sinner. It hasn't changed since Adam scapegoated Eve and Cain killed Abel. Anthropologically, I am told that religion begins with a distinction, the dividing of the world into the pure and the impure. On that lie, the whole structure builds. Jesus consistently undoes historic religion by touching and consorting with and doing the impure things. He is not much of a founder for a self-respecting religion. If there isn't an obvious and clear enemy like we had during the Second World War, we normally focus on something close to home. That's why the worst and most brutal wars tend to be civil wars. That's why most murders are within the family. The deepest hatreds are often toward those inside our own groups. We don't know what to do with our paranoia and hatred when there are no communists. So now we have school violence and conspiracy theories of every sort. Look at the clear hatred between liberals and conservatives in our own churches and Congress. The anger that used to safely go toward Nazis and communists now goes toward homosexuals and abortionists in our own hometowns. We not only remain fear-filled and hateful when we keep projecting our anxiety elsewhere, we also misdiagnose the real evil, the real problem. We normally substitute it with a smaller, closer problem that we can literally get our hands around. Someone recently asked why there seems to be so many control freaks in the church. I don't think this phenomenon appears only in the church. It's everywhere. When we know we're not really transforming culture, we're not really changing the world, we're not really having a great deal of influence at the high levels, we move to the level of micromanagement. We find some little tiny world where we can be in control and right, where we can be pure and clean. We might as well be saying, I can't clean up the world, so at least I'm going to clean up my living room. Or, I cannot really change and influence people, so I'm going to demand total conformity from the pulpit. Many of us act out some vision of this. I can't change the church, but I can empty my waste baskets and some things right inside my office or in our home. Faith, however, allows us to hold the tension until we can recognize the true evil of which we are a part. That's foundational to all compassionate and non-violent thinking. To attack the person out there is usually to simply continue the problem, because he or she is a victim too. The reason people do evil, why they hate sin or make mistakes, is because at some point they have been hurt, rejected, excluded, or wounded. They just keep passing it on, and the circle repeats and spreads. Jesus, you could say, came to break and even stop the cycle. Punitive behavior only continues the same old game, and I am afraid most of the church itself has yet to understand this. We still think it is about forcing conformity instead of seeking true interior transformation. We would rather punish and coerce a response. God is much more patient. What we call original sin in Genesis perhaps could, in a sense, be better called original shame, because Adam and Eve described themselves as feeling naked. Some of the first words of God to these newly created people are, "Who told you that you were naked?" Next, in a lovely maternal image, God as seamstress sew leather garments for them. The first thing God does after creating itself is cover the shame of these new creatures. This must name something that is fundamental within us. We live not just in an age of anxiety, but also in a time of primal shame. I find very few people who do not feel inadequate, stupid, dirty, unworthy. When people come to me for counseling or confession, they always express in one way or another. If people only knew the things I think, the things I've done, the things I've said, the things I want to do, who would love me? We all have the terrible feeling of a fundamental unworthiness. It takes many different forms, but somehow it appears in each of our lives. Christians indeed have a strange image of God, a naked, bleeding man dying on a cross. Let's be honest. If we were going to create a religion, would we ever have thought up this image of God? If I had been setting out to manufacture a religion, I would have manufactured 7 habits for highly effective people. I would have a big sun or a big golden orb for the symbol of God, and I would have called God the Force, but never in 1,000 years would I have thought of an image of God as a naked, bleeding, poor man rejected by both society and religion. We Catholics, maybe others out there, have grown up seeing the crucifix so many times that we don't realize how off-center it is. It's not that we would think the image of God could be or should be. In fact, I don't know if we even like it. I don't know if, like it, it is not the way I would have preferred to think about the world. Is God eccentric here, or is it we who have not diagnosed the human situation correctly? What question is God trying to answer by giving us a crucified man for God? What human problem is God trying to reveal, and from what is God trying to save us on the cross? We've always said that Jesus was trying to save us from our sin, and, of course, that's exactly right. As Paul says, Jesus became sin to free us from our sins. What then is our sin? I think it might be called ignorant killing. And Jesus reveals both the ignorance and the killing, which are both hidden from us. Jesus receives our hatred and does not return it. We suffer and does not make the other suffer. He does not first look at changing others. He pays the price of change within himself. He absorbs the mystery of human sin rather than passing it on. He does not use his suffering and death as power over others to punish them, but as power for others to transform them. The risen Jesus is the victory fully personified as the forgiving victim of history. He is himself transformed, resurrected, and resurrects the other. He includes and forgives the sinner instead of hating the sinner and thereby continuing the pattern of hate. He gives us a history and a future beyond the predictable violence. He stops the dance toward inevitable death. He destroys that forever, as we say at Easter. Jesus destroys the death that is eating us all alive, that is eating up our hearts. This death is our endless attempt to justify why we have a right to our hurt and to our hatred. Yet, he doesn't really cancel out death. He makes a trophy of it. It's as if he takes death and says, "Do you think you are going to use this against me, to destroy me? I'm going to use it to love you." It seems God only allows death and evil insofar as God can also use it in our favor. In the divine economy, nothing is wasted, not even sin, evil, or death. This is God's ultimate victory. In one sense or another, all ancient religions believed we had to spill our blood to get to God. God was distant, demanding, and dangerous. God couldn't possibly love us in our radical unworthiness. What we have in the mystery of the crucified Jesus is the reversal of all primal religion. No more human sacrifice, no more animal sacrifice, no more Jansenism, beating ourselves so we can be worthy of this God who basically doesn't like us. Instead of our spilling blood to get to God, we have God spilled blood to get to us. If you pray on this for a week, it's enough to transform you. God is always the initiator. God is always the hound of heaven, going out after us because God knows our primordial shame. God is always sewing garments to cover our immense and intense sense of unworthiness. Our very movements toward God are only because God has first moved toward us. In the very sense, true sense, Jesus undid religious forever. He was not the founder of a religion as much as he regrounded religion in the very sin and stuff of life. The gospel is not about winners or losers. The gospel really is about win-win, but very few get the message. I have to admit, ashamedly, that some people in the business and education worlds are better at this than some people in the church. They are beginning to understand that life cannot simply continue to be posited in the term of winners and losers. There has to be a way that we both can advance together. Mothers tend to have a head start in understanding this as a result of negotiating and compromising with their own children, whom they want to love equally and fully. The cross is a way of winning that ties to bring along our opponent with us. The cross is refusing to hate or to humiliate the other, because that would only be to continue the same pattern and reciprocated the violence. The cross is about authentic newness. It utterly reframes the human questions and forces us to redefine success. What is it we really want? What is it we're really after? The cross is about fight, though in the sense that we refuse the usual and predictable return punch. We flee from the predicted response so that something new and transformative can perhaps happen. We run from business as usually to reset the agenda, to reframe the question in a more positive way. It is also about fight, but with a whole new definition of what real power is and what real change is. Traditionally, women have tended to understand this more easily than men. Men themselves have historically been victims by being put into military and business worlds, where everything was framed in terms of win or lose. It kept them in the dualistic mindset much longer. The competitive paradigm became the only way that many men knew how to read reality. They thought that to be a hero meant to win. What the cross was supposed to do for Christians was redefine the true hero and heroine forever. In the first 2,000 years, only a small minority of clerics or laity ever got the point. Most of us continued in the old punitive system and, in fact, continued the same storyline. By that time, it was in our heart wiring. The cross is how to work for the answer without becoming part of the problem itself. Look to any number of wars to see why this is right. Even in the struggles of third world revolutions, we see again and again that people search for some kind of economic reform through fighting and the use of power. Invariably, when the revolutionaries get into the position of power, they do the same thing that had been done before. The cross calls all of us to a mystery of transformation. On the cross, none of us is in charge. None of us is in control. And none of us can possibly understand, just like Jesus himself. On the cross, someone else is in control. Someone else is in charge. Someone else understands. Someone else is obviously a much more patient lover than we are. So this is the full part of our session split up in two. The next time we're going to talk about the Great Awakenings, and probably I will have to divide it also. So I bless you and keep on walking in with your good journey. The journey that has a future in store for you. The God that will never forsake you. May God bless you. This is your Pastor Yeti. Bye-bye.